Conifer needles are one of the absolute best and tastiest tree ingredients out there. I've brought with me a fresh branch of fir needles from the forests of northern Austria, and I'm going to show you 3 drinks you can prepare with this marvelous and tasty tree ingredient. The first and probably the absolute easiest way to prepare fresh fir needles, just take any kind of teapot, a cup, whatever, and add a few twigs. The trick here is to not only add the twigs but also break the needles a bit. So carefully, maybe you could call it massaging the needles, but you want to break them a bit open so they release their oils and their fragrance. And I'm just gonna put them here in my cup, and now it's time to boil some water. Once your water is boiling, oh, it's boiling quite strongly actually, just pour it into here. And now, like any normal tea or herbal infusion, just let it steep for a bit. I would recommend the usual kind of 4 or 5 minutes, but of course if you want it more intense, if you want it stronger, go for the full 10 or even longer. Having steeped for around 5 minutes now, I can already smell the beautiful aroma. It has the fresh notes of the fir needles with kind of this orangey, citrusy flavors mixed with some sappiness, but in a very positive way. But then in the end it's also quite hearty and almost, I would even call it a bit sweet. So it's a perfect drink for any time of the day, be it morning or in the evening. And of course, if you're close to any kind of conifer forest, non-poisonous one that is, so pine needles, fir needles, spruce needles, those are all perfect for this kind of a drink, and it's absolutely the easiest thing you can cook with conifer needles as a main ingredient. Next comes a bit more of an advanced version, if you want, of the fir needle drink. This time we are also going to make a tea, but not with fresh fir needles, but rather with oven toasted fir needles. Going again with my trusty little cast iron pan, and I'm just going to put it here, and then I'm going to take a few of those fresh fir needles and put them in the pan. With a good amount of fresh fir needles, it's time to toast them. However, this is a very tricky process because you can only toast it. You definitely don't want to burn it. Taking my cast iron pan, placing it in the oven directly, but only maybe on the outside of the oven where it's not too hot, and then constantly stirring it. Once the needles have turned into a really, I would say, dark olive kind of brown, it's time to take them out. It's extremely fragrant. I'm gonna place them in my trusty pestle and mortar. And now I'm just gonna roughly grind it, so it doesn't have to be a fine powder or anything. I'm gonna take just a usual strainer, a tea strainer, and a cup, or if you want more of it, of course, go for a teapot. And then I'm gonna place those ground up toasted needles into the strainer. And now pour some boiling water over it. So it has now steeped for around 5 minutes. Let me give it a try. It has a bit not so fresh almost as before, but more kind of the roasted malty version, but still with a hint of citrus. It's almost like a bit of a perfume, like an Earl Grey tea, maybe that's the direction I would go with it, but made completely from fir needles. Next, I'm going to show you how to make an iced tea from fresh and toasted fir needles. For it, you need, of course, a glass. I'm going to use the strainer, which I already used before. Going to add some toasted and ground fir needles. Together with those toasted and ground fir needles, I'm going to take some fresh branches of fir needles, massage them or break up the needles so they release all their aromas and flavors. Also place it in the tea strainer. And finally, some hot but not boiling water. Let it steep again for maybe a bit more into the 10 minutes direction. Place it to the side. In the meantime, take some small oranges, cut a few slices, add the fresh orange slices while the water is still warm. And finally, stir in some maple syrup. also a tree product. So this delicious drink you can drink as is, still a bit warm, or of course you can place it in the fridge and make a classic iced tea out of it. I'm going to drink, since it is still a bit cold out here, I'm going to drink it still a bit warm. It is a beautiful tasting tea, very refreshing. You have the fresh notes from the fir needles with, you know, the citrusy notes and the sappiness, but then also the malty flavors, both from the toasted pine needles but also from the maple syrup. It's sweet, it's absolutely delicious, and it's one of my favorite ways to make iced tea. So there you go, the third and final drink made from fir needles.